What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. The Giants, they're going to play another football game in a couple of days. I don't know if you guys are excited about that or very scared about that, but we're going to go ahead and give you an important injury update that could severely affect the outcome of this game. Now, Malik Nabers popped up on the injury report this week. He was limited in Thursday's practice due to a knee injury, and for a brief moment in time there, Giants fans thought the world was ending. However, that's not the case. According to Brian Daboll, Malik Nabers, ready to go, fully healthy. He will be playing on Sunday, which is a big deal for this Giants team. I mean, we're talking about a team that didn't really get things going last week on the offensive side of the ball, but when they did, Malik Nabers was usually the guy getting things going. He had a couple of receptions for first downs. He had 66 total receiving yards. He led all rookies in receiving yards in week one. Now, it wasn't necessarily the game that we expected, though. 66 yards, not a ton. But going into this week 2 matchup, coming off of, I guess, an injury midweek, I do still think Malik Nabers is in line for a huge game because of the Washington Commanders secondary being Swiss cheese. Holes all over the place. So we're going to go ahead and kind of react to the fact that Nabers is playing and discuss what our expectations are for him in this week 2 matchup. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about Daniel Jones, our expectations and how often he can get the ball to Malik Nabers. That's like a whole other conversation, but we'll touch on that as well. And just happy to give you guys this positive injury update on Malik Nabers because, again, the world was ending for a minute there, but it's okay. Nabers is playing on Sunday. Thank God. Alex, how are you doing? How are you feeling about Nabers playing on Sunday, and what are your expectations for him going up against the Commanders?
Yeah, listen, I mean, we saw him pop up on the injury report. I tweeted out, I'm not going to freak out until we see Friday's injury report. And, Dable said he's 100% he's fine, ready to go. Nabers said himself, I'm good to go. It just seems precautionary, like one of those situations where, like, your star player, it has a little bit of a nagging thing or something tweaked or pulled in practice, and it was nothing serious, but they wanted to just make sure they're going by the book. Obviously, they have to report these things, I think, by the rules of the NFL if a guy's limited in any way. So, they're just doing the due diligence there, but seemingly totally fine. And, talk about what I expect from him this week. Now, really, really interesting line this week from BetUS, our sponsor. Remember, 150% up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits. Make sure to take advantage of that. YouTube 150 is the promo code. But they have the line set at 66.5. I mean, Nabers led all receivers, rookie receivers at the very most last week in yards. I think that's a pretty good indication that he's a little bit DJ proof. He's Daniel Jones proof in a lot of ways. Now, I do think that the Vikings defense is a lot better than the Commanders defense. And, you're going to talk about losing Emmanuel Forbes, and obviously they have Benjamin St. Juste. They have a couple of, really inexperienced and really suspect cornerbacks, to be quite honest with you. I think that, look, if Daniel Jones even has a competent game, I think that he is going to have over 200 passing yards, and I think that Nabers is going to have well over 60 receiving yards. I think they're going to take some more shots. This defense is very susceptible to the passing game, and I think that, look, if Daniel Jones can't have success in this, he should be benched by week 3. Like this defense is that bad. If he cannot have success against this type of defense where they just gave up a ton of points, 4 passing touchdowns to Baker Mayfield, they cannot sustain this. Like they cannot sustain Daniel Jones holding their offense back. He has to have a big game this week. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If he doesn't have a big game, he should be benched for a different player because the lack of confidence, the lack of decision making, the happy feet. I get week 1, whatever. It was really, really bad. But Brian Daboll said, we're not turning off of him just yet. We're gonna keep giving him a chance to kind of compound better days, hopefully. But Anthony, to me, it's do or die for him right now. This is a really bad defense, one of the worst he may ever face in his career. And if he doesn't cook them, it's time for the Giants to just cut bait. It's time for them to just make the decision where if he gets hurt, we're cooked. Like, we are screwed. They have to make a business decision on Daniel Jones if he struggles in this one. I'm hoping he doesn't. I'm hoping that Nabers has a big game. And because of that, I am going to take the over because Daniel Jones' back is up against the wall, man. Guns to his head. He's got to get himself out of this situation one way or another. It has to happen now. There is no more time to waste for him.
Yeah, he needs to cook this Commanders defense or he is cooked is essentially what we're looking at here for Daniel Jones. So for the Malik Nabers over, I like it, especially considering the fact that this Commanders secondary got completely torched last week. I mean, you're talking about Mike Evans going for 2 touchdowns, over 80 yards for Chris Godwin as well. Baker Mayfield looked like the MVP of the NFL last week against the Washington Commanders. He absolutely torched them. So I do expect Malik Nabers to get his 66.5 receiving yards. I'll take the over on that. I think that he will clear that line. But talking about why maybe he wouldn't clear that line, talking about why Daniel Jones might get cooked in this game, Alex, and I think that it's a conversation reminiscent of one that we had last week. Now, if you guys remember on this channel, we did a live stream and I kind of discussed the reasons for and against Daniel Jones playing well in week 1. And now, reasons for, everybody pointed to the fact that he had 2 matchups against the Vikings in the past. He played well in both of those matchups. Offensive line is improved. Malik Nabers is here. All of these factors were going for Daniel Jones in week 1. But what was going against him? Why did he ultimately end up failing in week 1? Well, it's honestly something that I said on this channel might happen, and I am fearful that it could happen again. And what I said was essentially, this was not the same Vikings defense that he faced 2 years ago. Instead, this is a Brian Flores-led Vikings defense, a very experienced and aggressive and smart former head coach, now defensive coordinator. So if you look at this Washington Commanders team, in the past, Daniel Jones has a 5-1-1 record against this team. He's had a lot of success against the Washington Commanders, has put up big numbers against them. But this is not the same Washington Commanders team that Daniel Jones has cooked in years past. Instead, this is a Washington Commanders team now led by Dan Quinn, their new head coach, who was formerly the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. And if you think back to Daniel Jones's recent performances against the Dallas Cowboys, well, he hasn't really played well against Dallas ever, in a very long time at least. Dan Quinn has had Daniel Jones's number on several occasions. So, similar story to last week. Former head coach goes into defensive coordinator, very smart, got the best of Daniel Jones. Now we're talking about a former defensive coordinator taking over this defense as the head coach, but this guy has gotten the better of Daniel Jones several times in the past. So I am hesitant to bet on anyone in this Giants offense this week, let alone Daniel Jones. I think that this could be a little bit of a trap where Giants fans get comfortable knowing in the past Jones has cooked the Commanders. But I don't think we realize this is not the same Commanders defense. Yes, they got torched last week, and they don't have a lot of talent in their secondary, but they do have a lot of talent on their sideline. Dan Quinn is a very smart defensive mind, and he has gotten the best of Daniel Jones nearly every single time he has matched up against him. If you guys think back to last season, week 1, Giants versus Cowboys on primetime, Dan Quinn embarrassed this New York Giants team, and he's done it multiple times. He has a very great ability to run these disguised defenses that trip up Daniel Jones frequently. So I am concerned going into this game that Daniel Jones, while history tells you he has had success against the Commanders, he should continue to have success against a very bad Commanders secondary. He is going against a defensive coordinator that has gotten his number on many occasions. So that's my big concern here. I don't know how severely that impacts Malik Nabers. I think Nabers, no matter what, should be able to put up a decent amount of yards on this team, just like he did last week against the Vikings. He should be getting open. He's facing an inferior competition, let's face it, in that Washington secondary. But how clean can this football be kept by Daniel Jones is going to be my question. Does he turn the ball over multiple times against the Dan Quinn defense, like he did when Dan Quinn was coaching the Dallas Cowboys in the past? These are my question marks going into this game. None of them have anything to do with Nabers. He's fully healthy. He's ready to go. He'll get his touches, and he'll put up some yardage. But can Daniel Jones actually sustain drives and score touchdowns in this lineup against Dan Quinn? That's going to be my big question going into week 2, Alex.
Absolutely is, and as you kind of said here, this is a different Commanders scheme, and they're going to try and get after Daniel Jones. Dan Quinn knows all about putting Daniel Jones in, stuffing him in a locker, and forcing him to make mistakes, similar to what we saw with Tua yesterday, and prayers up to Tua of that hit he took. I mean, God, I can't help but say, I think he should retire at this point. His future is in jeopardy now. But I hope to God he's good and bounces back and is healthy and fine. But you saw what happened when the Buffalo Bills let him make mistakes. They were like, all right, you know what? We're gonna give you the opportunity to throw the ball downfield, and we're just gonna let you make the mistakes for us. And I'm evident by the 3 interceptions. So looking at Daniel Jones, teams do the same thing to Daniel Jones. They say, you know what? We're going to give you the easy stuff. They did it last week. You want to know what happened? He had multiple passes that either hit the dirt or were behind guys or weren't in the right spots, a couple drops. The Giants beat themselves, and they forced him to make the throws. Make the easy throws. Beat us that way. You know what makes Patrick Mahomes so great? He doesn't miss easy throws. You know what made Tom Brady so good? He never missed easy throws. Like 99.9%, he took advantage of everything opposing defenses give you. To be a great quarterback in football, even a good one, you have to capitalize on what defenses are allowing you to have. There's always room. There's always space. It's just a matter of where you're going with the football. Daniel Jones missed a lot of easy opportunities. If Dan Quinn tries to do the same thing, Daniel Jones cannot miss on the easy throws. He has to hit the crossers. He has to hit the comebacks. He has to hit the open guys. He has to have his eyes downfield. He can't run into sacks. Daniel Jones beat the Giants for the Vikings last week, and it's unacceptable. It can't happen again. That's why the leash is so short to begin with. But, Anthony, looking at this situation, do you think that Dan Quinn's going to be like, you know what, Daniel Jones, how about you beat us? We're going to give you the easy ones. We're going to cover up the deeper portions of the field. And is that why you're more concerned about Nabers? Is because ultimately they're just going to be like, look, get through your progressions. We're going to cover up your first read, and then you're going to have to actually move through your progressions and read the field. It seems to be a really easy equation to beat Daniel Jones, a really simple one that everyone's using these days. And I feel like we're probably going to see more of it on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, listen, you make some really good points there. The Vikings didn't really do anything too crazy with their defensive scheme last week, but they did have a few disguised coverages. And if you guys checked out my film breakdown on Daniel Jones that I posted midweek, I showed that red zone interception that he threw. On that play, the Vikings lined up in a clear and obvious all-out blitz look. It looked a lot like cover zero because the linebackers were right there bluffing their blitz. They bailed on that. They ran a cover two invert, and Daniel Jones didn't recognize that post-snap, threw the ball anyway, threw the interception to Harrison Smith. This is something that Daniel Jones has really struggled with, disguised coverages, pre-snap and post-snap processing. And with these experienced former head coaches turned defensive coordinators like a Brian Flores, or in this case, former head coach turned DC, now turned head coach again in Dan Quinn, they love to disguise their coverages. And you're right, Alex, they're not going to send a ton of blitzes and force pressure onto Daniel Jones and make him turn the ball over that way. They're going to drop a lot of people into coverage, create these small windows to throw into, and force Daniel Jones to basically pick a window and then throw into it and likely throw into traffic. That's kind of their MO and game planning for Daniel Jones lately. It hasn't been to confuse him pre-snap. It's been to apply pressure to him and make him throw the ball up. It's been to confuse him post-snap by changing the coverage and just having him throw them the ball willy-nilly. But what you saw last year, week one, Alex, I mean, if we're talking about that Cowboys game, because that's the most recent matchup that Dan Quinn coached against Daniel Jones, there were a few things that stood out. First of all, Dallas has one of the most talented defenses in the NFL. They have stars all over the place. Micah Parsons is only one of them. They had Trayvon Diggs in that week one matchup. They have DeMarcus Lawrence. Their linebackers were good in week one of last year. They had emerging players in the secondary. That was a great Dallas team. This is not the same caliber of defense that Daniel Jones is going up against. But again, it's the same defensive coordinator. So back to my takeaways from that week one game last year. The Cowboys did two things very well. Number one, they slowed down the run. In that first drive, Saquon Barkley ran up the field. The Giants had that field goal. It got blocked. We know the rest of the story. But after that drive, the running game really wasn't there. Now, the second thing that they did, disguise their coverages mixed with a really hefty amount of pressure. Okay, so they disguised some of these coverages pre-snap into post-snap. Daniel Jones threw the ball into harm's way, and oftentimes he was throwing the ball into harm's way because the four-man rush was getting home. Dan Quinn wasn't necessarily sending a ton of blitzes at Daniel Jones. The Giants' offensive line just couldn't hold up in pass protection, and guys like Parsons and Lawrence were getting through pretty much in a nanosecond because they were just destroying the Giants' offensive linemen. So here's the key here for Daniel Jones. First of all, you have to get better at your post-snap processing. Make sure you're not throwing into a coverage that you didn't anticipate. That's number one. The number two key here is, and this has nothing to do with Daniel Jones, pass protection has to stand up to the test. Because if we're facing four-man rushes this week, like we did last week, and we handled that well, but if we face them this week and we lose some of those battles, Daniel Jones will be under pressure and he will make mistakes. So the offensive line, we need a performance like last week. Once again, the Giants ranked in the top 14 in the NFL in their pass protection rate. So that's great stuff. That's a step right in the right direction. But can they sustain that going into week 2 against a lesser defense here with the Washington Commanders? I think that they can, but if they don't, that's where things could get troublesome for Daniel Jones. So once again, Alex, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but this is a quarterback-driven league. The Giants' ability to win this game rests on the shoulders of their quarterback, Daniel Jones. Can he keep the football clean? Can he pick apart a very bad secondary? If he can keep the ball clean and he can expose some of the problems that the Commanders have in the secondary, the Giants can and will win this game. But if Daniel Jones, again, not facing the same Commanders team of past, it's a different coach here. If he struggles against this team, I just can't see any justification for moving forward into week 3 with him still under center. So this feels like maybe the most important game of Daniel Jones' career. He is playing for his job, in my opinion. This is make or break. And I think that there are a lot of reasons why he could make here, but there are a few reasons, glaringly obvious reasons, why he could break. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup on Sunday, Alex. Any other remaining thoughts on Daniel Jones as he prepares to face, yes, a bad Washington Commanders secondary, but a well-coached one?
So I'll say this. Listen, is anyone out there, as the corners of the earth at this point, that believes Daniel Jones has a chance to even be a competent NFL quarterback? His stat line on Sunday cannot look like 150 yards, one passing touchdown, and 75 rushing yards and a touchdown. It's never going to be sustainable for Daniel Jones to be a rushing quarterback. He gets hurt too often. It's unsustainable. His stat line needs to be 275 and 3 passing touchdowns and 10 rushing touchdowns. 10, imagine that. 10 rushing yards. That's what his line needs to look like. Why? Because that means he's staying in the pocket, he's making the right throws, making the right decisions, and using his arm, which is what a quarterback is supposed to do. Unless you're Lamar Jackson or you're Anthony Richardson or one of these freak athletes, it's different. It's different, and even Lamar has problems throwing the ball sometimes. He's an electrifying runner, and they base their entire scheme around him and Derrick Henry now, right? So, you look at what Daniel Jones needs to do. I'm not gonna say don't run. If there's opportunities and they're leaving him the space, go do it. But I want to see him win from the pocket. I want to see him stand there confident and tall and make the throws. We've seen quarterbacks much younger and much less experienced than him. CJ Stroud's a perfect example. Stand there in the pocket, not get scared, and throw the freaking rock pinpoint with guys that are, his blockers are inches away and guys are swiping at him, but he's standing tall, confident, and making time for himself by small movements. Daniel Jones, when you watch him move, he runs, he takes like 5 steps back and then runs 6 steps forward, and his pocket awareness and pocket movement is some of the worst I've ever seen. You know what I mean? He looks like a dreidel in there, man. He's spinning around in circles. Like it's crazy. Like you just don't see guys in your 6th year operating like this. We've seen him look better in the past, but it's so wildly inconsistent that it doesn't actually make sense that he's this bad at this point in time when it comes to the pocket awareness. So I need to see exponentially better pocket awareness from him, movement in the pocket, buying time. You don't have to go full sprint right into a guy. You can just step up, keep your eyes downfield, wait for Wandale to get open, who was wide open multiple times that he missed. You know what I mean? Just be confident. Like he's so clearly mentally fractured in a lot of ways, and it's so evident in just watching his film, watching him live, that he is not confident in himself. You cannot have a franchise quarterback who is not confident in themselves. It is a recipe for disaster. So if he's not confident in himself this week against a bad Commanders secondary that might be coached better than usual, but is still very bad in terms of talent, the Giants need to call on someone who has more confidence than him. So that's what I'll leave it at. He's got to be better. He says he's not mentally, hurting. If he's sitting there saying he's confident and he's performing like that, we have a bigger problem than we even think.
Yeah, if this is him at full confidence, and if he was fully confident going into week 1, obviously he's going to tell everybody that he's confident. He's not going to say, "Oh, I'm lacking confidence." That's not something that the quarterback is going to do. But if that was him at his full confidence and talents, that is very concerning considering what we saw in week 1. You're right. He ran into sacks. He applied pressure to himself on more than one occasion. And listen, this, like I said, it's make or break for Daniel Jones. I think we're all kind of at our wits' end here. I think we all kind of know the writing is on the wall and he has to turn things around immediately. Like I've always said, it's not good enough for Daniel Jones to be good enough anymore. It needs to be great. Otherwise, he can get Russell Wilson, meaning that injury clause will come into the minds of the New York Giants brass, and they will end up benching him if he's not playing at a high level. So all of those factors considered, week 2, on the road, first rivalry matchup of the season. You need an NFC East to win here. I hate to say it, must-win game, not only for Daniel Jones, but also for this New York Giants football team. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. The X factor of this game, though, Alex, outside of Daniel Jones, obviously we know it all hinges on his shoulders, but outside of him, it's Malik Nabers. Get him the goddamn ball. I am not going to go through this again. I'm not going to sit here and complain about how Nabers isn't getting the ball enough the same way I used to complain because OBJ wasn't getting the ball enough, and then all of a sudden Saquon Barkley stopped getting the ball as much as he should. Get Malik Nabers the goddamn football. Throw it to him in space. Throw him some screens. Goddamn it, give him some handoffs. I don't care what you do. Just give him the football. Put it in his hands. If you watched him at all at LSU, you know that he can turn a 5-yard gain into a 75-yard touchdown. Give him the football. And that's not on just Daniel Jones. That's on Brian Dable and Mike Kafka and all of those other assistant coaches as well. Scheme him open. Get him the ball in space. Let him make some plays. And then the part of it that's on Daniel Jones, I don't care if Malik Nabers is not open. Throw him the ball anyway. Like, if you've got an opportunity there for a 50-50 ball, it's a 60-40 for Nabers. So throw it up and let him make a play, like he did on that 25-yard reception that he had in Week 1 versus Minnesota. So Nabers, fully healthy, ready to go. We are very thrilled to be giving you guys that positive injury update, and happy that we were able to sit down and kind of preview this matchup for Jones and Nabers versus this Washington defense and secondary. Should be a really interesting game. Of course, we got one more day, and then it's game day, so tomorrow be on the lookout for some sort of upload, maybe a live stream on the channel previewing this upcoming matchup between the Giants and the Commanders. Super excited for it. Hopefully it goes our way. If not, well, it's going to be another pit of misery on Sunday afternoon here on the channel, but hopefully that's not the case. Anyway, we're going to get out of here. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.